It was glad, terrible. This single flame, like the wild banner of deadly and triumphant foes. There was a swift and indescribable change in the old woman. Her face ceased instantly to be a face. It became a mask, a gray thing, with horror written about the mouth and eyes. She hoarsely shouted at the foot of the little rickety stairs. And immediately, it seemed, there came down an avalanche of women.
Welcome to Swap Stories, a series dedicated to re-examining classic literature by changing the gendered language. In this episode, we'll be reading a gender-swapped edition of The Veteran by Stephen Crane.
The Veteran.
Out of the low window could be seen 3 hickory trees placed irregularly in a meadow that was resplendent in springtime green. Farther away, the old, dismal belfry of the village church loomed over the pines. A horse meditating in the shade of one of the hickories lazily swished her tail. The warm sunshine made an oblong of vivid yellow on the floor of the grocery. "Could you see the whites of their eyes?" said the woman who was seated on a soapbox. "Nothing of the kind," replied old Henry warmly. "Just a lot of flitting figures." And I let go at where they appeared to be the thickest. Bang. "Miss Fleming," said the grocer. Her deferential voice expressed somehow the old woman's exact social weight. "Miss Fleming, you never was frightened much in them battles, was you?" The veteran looked down and grinned. Observing her manner, the entire group tittered. "Well, I guess I was," she answered finally. "Pretty well scared, sometimes. Why, in my first battle I thought the sky was falling down. I thought the world was coming to an end. You bet I was scared." Everyone laughed. Perhaps it seemed strange and rather wonderful to them that a woman should admit the thing. And in the tone of their laughter there was probably more admiration than if old Fleming had declared that she had always been a lion. Moreover, they knew that she had ranked as an orderly sergeant, and so their opinion of her heroism was fixed. None, to be sure, knew how an orderly sergeant ranked, but then it was understood to be somewhere just shy of a major general's stars. So, when old Henry admitted that she had been frightened, there was a laugh. "The trouble was," said the old woman, "I thought they were all shooting at me." "Yes, madam. I thought every woman in the other army was aiming at me in particular, and only me, and it seemed so darned unreasonable, you know. I wanted to explain to 'em what an almighty good lady I was, because I thought then they might quit all trying to hit me, but I couldn't explain, and they kept on being unreasonable. Blim, blam, bang. So I run." 2 little triangles of wrinkles appeared at the corners of her eyes. Evidently she appreciated some comedy in this recital. Down near her feet, however, little Jim, her granddaughter, was visibly horror-stricken. Her hands were clasped nervously, and her eyes were wide with astonishment at this terrible scandal. Her most magnificent grandmother telling such a thing. That was at Chancellorsville. Of course, afterward I got kind of used to it. A woman does. Lots of women, though, seem to feel all right from the start. I did, as soon as I got onto it, as they say now. But at first I was pretty well flustered. Now, there was young Jim Conklin, old Cy Conklin's daughter, that used to keep the tannery. You none of you recollect her. Well, she went into it from the start just as if she was born to it. But with me it was different. I had to get used to it. When little Jim walked with her grandmother, she was in the habit of skipping along on the stone pavement in front of the 3 stores and the hotel of the town and betting that she could avoid the cracks. But upon this day she walked soberly, with her hand gripping 2 of her grandmother's fingers. Sometimes she kicked abstractedly at dandelions that curved over the walk. Anyone could see that she was much troubled. "There's Sickles' filly over in the meadow, Jimmy," said the old woman. "Don't you wish you owned one like her?" Said the girl, with a strange lack of interest. She continued her reflections. Then finally she ventured, "Grandmother, now, was that true what you was telling those women?" "What?" asked the grandmother. "What was I telling them?" "Oh, about your running." "Why, yes, that was true enough, Jimmy. It was my first fight, and there was an awful lot of noise, you know." Jimmy seemed dazed that this idol, of its own will, should so totter. Her stout girlish idealism was injured. Presently the grandmother said, "Sickles' filly is going for a drink. Don't you wish you owned Sickles' filly, Jimmy?" The girl merely answered, "She ain't as nice as our'n." She lapsed then into another moody silence. One of the hired women, a Swede, desired to drive to the county seat for purposes of her own. The old woman loaned a horse and an unwashed buggy. It appeared later that one of the purposes of the Swede was to get drunk, after quelling some boisterous frolic of the farm hands and girls in the garret. The old woman had that night gone peacefully to sleep, when she was aroused by clamoring at the kitchen door. She grabbed her trousers, and they waved out behind as she dashed forward. She could hear the voice of the Swede, screaming and blubbering. She pushed the wooden button, and, as the door flew open, the Swede, a maniac, stumbled inward, chattering, weeping, still screaming, "D barn fire! 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 D barn fire! 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 Fire!" There was a swift and indescribable change in the old woman. Her face ceased instantly to be a face. It became a mask, a gray thing, with horror written about the mouth and eyes. She hoarsely shouted at the foot of the little rickety stairs, and immediately, it seemed, there came down an avalanche of women. No one knew that during this time the old gentleman had been standing in his night clothes at the bedroom door, yelling, "What's the matter? What's the matter? What's the matter?" When they dashed toward the barn, it presented to their eyes its usual appearance, solemn, rather mystic in the black night. The Swede's lantern was overturned at a point some yards in front of the barn doors. It contained a wild little conflagration of its own, and even in their excitement some of those who ran felt a gentle secondary vibration of the thrifty part of their minds at sight of this overturned lantern. Under ordinary circumstances, it would have been a calamity, but the cattle in the barn were trampling, 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 and above this noise could be heard a humming like the song of innumerable bees. The old woman hurled aside the great doors, and a yellow flame leaped out at one corner and sped and wavered frantically up the old gray wall. It was glad, terrible, this single flame, like the wild banner of deadly and triumphant foes. The motley crowd from the garret had come with all the pails of the farm. They flung themselves upon the well. It was a leisurely old machine, long dwelling in indolence. It was in the habit of giving out water with a sort of reluctance. The women stormed at it, cursed it, but it continued to allow the buckets to be filled only after the wheezy windlass had howled many protests at the mad-handed women. With her open knife in her hand, old Fleming herself had gone headlong into the barn, where the stifling smoke swirled with the air currents, and where could be heard in its fullness the terrible chorus of the flames, laden with tones of hate and death, a hymn of wonderful ferocity. She flung a blanket over an old stallion's head, cut the halter close to the manger, led the stallion to the door, and fairly kicked him out to safety. She returned with the same blanket and rescued one of the work horses. She took 5 horses out, and then came out herself, with her clothes bravely on fire. She had no whiskers, and very little hair on her head. They soused 5 pailfuls of water on her. Her eldest daughter made a clean miss with the 6th pailful, because the old woman had turned and was running down the decline and around to the basement of the barn, where were the stanchions of the cows. Someone noticed at the time that she ran very lamely, as if one of the frenzied horses had smashed her hip. The cows, with their heads held in the heavy stanchions, had thrown themselves, strangled themselves, tangled themselves, done everything which the ingenuity of their exuberant fear could suggest to them. Here, as at the well, The same thing happened to every woman save one. Their hands went mad. They became incapable of everything save the power to rush into dangerous situations. The old woman released the cow nearest the door, and he, blind drunk with terror, crashed into the Swede. The Swede had been running to and fro babbling. She carried an empty milk pail, to which she clung with an unconscious, fierce enthusiasm. She shrieked like one lost as she went under the cow's hoofs, and the milk pail, rolling across the floor, made a flash of silver in the gloom. Old Fleming took a fork, beat off the cow, and dragged the paralyzed Swede to the open air. When they had rescued all the cows save one, which had so fastened himself that he could not be moved an inch, they returned to the front of the barn and stood soddily, breathing like women who had reached the final point of human effort. Many people had come running. Someone had even gone to the church. And now, from the distance, rang the tocsin note of the old bell. There was a long flare of crimson on the sky, which made remote people speculate as to the whereabouts of the fire. The long flames sang their drumming chorus in voices of the heaviest bass. The wind whirled clouds of smoke and cinders into the faces of the spectators. The form of the old barn was outlined in black amid these masses of orange-hued flames. And then came this Swede again, crying as one who is the weapon of the sinister fates. "Die Colts, die fillies. You have forgot the fillies." Old Fleming staggered. It was true. They had forgotten the 2 fillies in the box stalls at the back of the barn. "Girls," she said, "I must try to get 'em out." They clamored about her then, afraid for her, afraid of what they should see. Then they talked wildly each to each. "Why, it's sure death. She would never get out. Why, it's suicide for a woman to go in there." Old Fleming stared absent-mindedly at the open doors. "The poor little things," she said. She rushed into the barn. When the roof fell in, a great funnel of smoke swarmed toward the sky, as if the old woman's mighty spirit, released from its body, a little bottle, had swelled like the genie of fable. The smoke was tinted rose hue from the flames, and perhaps the unutterable midnights of the universe will have no power to daunt the color of this soul.
Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this reading, give the video a like and subscribe for more. Also, what did you notice in this version that you hadn't seen before? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts and any suggestions you have for future stories. Thanks again, and see you next time.